get
Okay.
your streaming set. Okay, I think you're streaming. You're good to go.
Okay, Colleen. All right. Meeting coming to order at 7:03 PM. So we can start with roll call. Jason, you're in the top left. Just go around and say your name.
Jason Ralph here.
Henry Thayer,
Roland Benjamin.
Susan Marcus.
Jocelyn Leska.
Lauren Weinstock.
Jonathan, you're next. You're on mute.
Jonathan Daly Lavelle.
Thank you. Okay, there is a quorum for the meeting. And the third item on our agenda has to do with approval of minutes from December 17th and January 28th. Has everybody had a chance to look through them? I did today. You know,
Your December meetings, you've got meeting minutes. You do not have the January meeting minutes.
okay, that's right. You're right, Bob. I did look at the December meeting, and other than a couple of typos I noticed in there, they seem to be okay. Susan, what do you?
Send those in. We'll correct them.
Susan, did you notice anything?
No, I didn't even see the typos.
Oh, okay. All right. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes, please?
Jocelyn.
Jocelyn has made the motion. May I have a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, item 4, correspondence and public comment. Do we have anything, Rob?
No correspondence, and you've got no attendees in your audience, so no public comments.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, discussion. Item 5A, coordination with other committees. I think at this time, you know, Susan, I saw some communication coming through from Jay. He was finding a column in his spreadsheet. I think he got it fixed sometime this afternoon, but I don't know if I doubt if he's ready to publish anything that we can start working with.
No, I saw Brian told him how to fix his problem.
Yeah, that was it.
Because I was going to tell him, but so no, I don't think we have anything to report, except I'm wondering whether, since I'm excited about all the GIS things the town is doing, I wonder if we should take his database and map it, and you could see where the businesses are.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if Carol doesn't have anything to do one afternoon, we could ask her to do that.
Yeah.
Carol's been recuperating for the last month. She's just at home recuperating from shoulder surgery. So.
Oh, good. Okay. I mean, I'm glad she's recuperating.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to item B, the tax calculator tool. And I note the attendance of Jean-Paul Bouchard. And Rob, I think he's going to make some comments about this tax calculator tool.
Yeah, so we looked at this just about a year ago now. COVID hit, and we had sort of said this is an interesting tool. It's a fun tool. It'd be a good thing to somehow get out there. And then COVID hit, and it just didn't seem to make any sense. The tool this and last year, you know, since there was a 0% property tax increase, calculating your taxes wasn't going to be hard.
Yeah.
So it wasn't going to be particularly useful last year. But as we come into the tax season this year, it may be useful to put the tool back out. I don't know if folks had any suggestions or thoughts since last we spoke about this, about what we might do to make it more user-friendly. We had explored the possibility of putting a GUI interface on it. We had talked to folks over at the high school about whether there was anybody who could take up the project, and it just never went anywhere. So it exists still in its Excel spreadsheet ugly form. I know there's concern that it may be a little bit too many cells and too many colors and too many lines and all that sort of thing. If folks have got thoughts about how to sort of get rid of the clutter, if there's anything in that sheet that you think we could just take out that would make it simple enough, clear enough, not confusing enough, I'm happy to, take those comments either now, or I'm happy to take those comments via email at any time, and we'll look at it again and see if we can just put that spreadsheet out so the public can play with it. You'll remember it had really two purposes. One was to simply give you a tax calculator, which is literally just, your current rate times, the tax rate. It's not a big deal. But it also did sort of a household budget calculation as well. It looked at what your expenses or what the expenses in a household were, and then, sort of looked at your discretionary income as it related to the tax increase. So that was kind of the benefit, I thought, of that tool. So it's still out there. It's still ready to go. It's kind of, I'd say 80 or 90% of the way there. The question is whether we think people can tolerate the sort of clunkiness of it in its current form or not.
I've got one just thought that has always been with me on this tax. Really, the tax tool is we could probably look at this, but the variability of an individual property owner's tax base is it's more volatile in assessment year, reassessment years, and that kind of thing. I'd actually, it's almost like we're trying to dial down into some level of precision when there's this wicked impactful variable on the outside that's just good. Every complaint I've ever heard about somebody's taxes going through the roof, it's always about the assessment. And then of course you don't hear the complaint when an assessment goes down. But so it's like if you go plus or minus 10%, and then we're trying to make a tool that you can dial into plus or minus 0.5%.
Right.
I don't know the real magnitude of its functionality, I guess. So anyway,
yeah, no, so the tool would allow you to play with that, obviously, because one of the elements of the tool is the current assessed value of the property. So, play with that, move it up and down 10%, and you're going to see a different tax bill come out at the bottom of the sheet. Mm-hmm. But your point is right. I mean, I think that the thing that does get people more than anything else everywhere is the assessment. It's one of the built-in sort of problems with the property tax as the main way of funding local government activities. And the property tax it's not very kind to people who are on a fixed income who have appreciating assets.
Yeah.
It changes people's ability to stay in communities. It changes people's ability to enjoy the quality of life that they thought they had when they made a purchase 30 years ago and made investments and improvements, and it distorts behavior in some pretty weird ways. I've been in communities where the outsides of the buildings are left to be run down. They all look like hell from the outside. You go inside and there's granite countertops and chandeliers, and the document is just never let in. Baltimore is a place where you see that. It happens quite often. So yeah, the property tax is not perfect, and assessments are part of the problem. Gene, of course, is part of the solution.
To Roland's point about the precision of the tool, I mean, on the one hand, it's true, you can't always predict how the assessment's going to change, but it's every 3 years. So that's 3 times in a decade, which there's some room to absorb the uncertainty there. I think the element of the tool that I find a little bit more unwieldy is all the kind of personal budgeting, because that could change month to month. And people have a lot more control. I mean, they don't have complete control always over how their personal budgets are, but I feel uncomfortable kind of pushing out a tool in the context of kind of coming from the town that has all of this kind of, personal budgeting, because that's, completely objective, how people use that, how they interpret the different components of that. I think something a little bit more concrete around the property tax, even the changing assessment, is going to be more useful to people than kind of this other element that is to me, that's the more variable component of the tool.
Yeah, so the tool was actually designed originally to be used as a tool for the town council more than anything else. They had asked for a model that would help them understand what a tax increase or what a tax change would mean for various groups of people. And you can't do, for the lower quartile, it means this, for the upper quartile, it means that, because you've got low income earners who are living in, $1 million homes. It's a very strange, problem. You can't just say your tax is going to be applied evenly across these various income strata, and the impact is going to be X, Y, and Z across those strata, because retired persons have low income, but they may have high assets. So they may be taxed highly on a low income. Meanwhile, et cetera, et cetera. So the tool was designed to allow people to do the what if scenario. If I put my numbers in, what does this mean to me? That was or if the council were to put somebody's hypothetical numbers in, what would it mean for that person? Let me think through sort of people I know and what I think I know about my cousin and my uncle and what this is going to do for people whose situations I think I have some feel for. That's what it was designed to do.
Yeah, I mean, I just suppose that's so idiographic that I don't know how the town council would use that in their policy making anyhow. Because, I mean, you have high income earners who are completely over leveraged too. Yep. So, there's so many variability, there's so much variability, right, and so many differences to say this is how it's going to affect this person or that person. It just, at that point, there's so many permutations of what that, I find that part of the, I guess I just,
30,796 permutations of that.
Right, exactly. So then at that point, how useful is it even to the town council when they're making decisions?
Well, it's more useful, I would suggest, I think, more useful than the average $350,000 household, is going to see a tax increase of $200 or $150 or $62 this year. That's the metric everybody uses, and it eliminates all of the complexity of the situation for the other 3,000 or 30,970. What is it? 5 at that point. I mean, it takes all of the subtlety out of the problem. So that was what the tool was designed to start getting at, was what does this mean for real people? What does this mean for people with different circumstances who aren't the average $350,000 value? And it's now, by the way, $400,000 value home. To Roland's point, it's not just the assessment, it's the appreciation that happens as well, although the assessment's where we catch that.
I mean, I think the town council could look at the tool as well in terms of whether or not they want to expand the elderly, which I don't know what the age is on that. Again, it's not really very elderly, but the elderly tax abatement, or whether or not they'd want to have tax abatement available for other aged people who may just have lower income.
Yep.
Wasn't this originally about trying to figure out how the effect of the bond, the school bond, would affect taxes as well? I can't remember what's on the,
Not the original
okay.
purpose. The original purpose was really just to look at the tax impacts, but because the bond was happening at the same time, was being discussed at the same time, there was a module built into it.
Gotcha.
Speaking of the bond, Rob, where is it? Is it going to go on the ballot?
The state legislature has proposed legislation pending. It has not yet been referred to committee, but I'm told that we should expect authorization to put a bond question before the voters by the end of March,
Okay.
probably in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. All right. Moving on to item C on the agenda. Discussion of COVID-19 related data. And I put this comment in there with an increased amount of optimism on opening South Kingstown. Because what I would like to see, and I think all of us would like to see, is a very, not quite 100% summer, but at least if we can get up 90%, because it would give our businesses quite a shot in the arm. And also bring more tourism in. Is there anything that anybody can add to this discussion about the COVID-19 data? I've been watching it carefully, and so far I haven't been able to tell whether we're getting better or not. Are we getting better, Jocelyn? Tell me we're getting better.
Yes, we're getting better. Yes, we're getting better. We're getting profoundly better. The things that we're getting better at in terms of, socially distant, I hate that term, appropriately spacing ourselves from each other and still maintaining some kind of connectivity, washing our hands, wearing our masks, in some circumstances, certainly wearing a double mask. And I have adopted that for the supermarket, even though I'm thoroughly vaccinated. The variants are of a concern. The variant is of a concern.
Mhm.
But in terms of the moment, if we can continue to impress upon people the necessity of all of the barriers, the personal space and the face masks and the hand washing, and we can get people vaccinated. If we get people vaccinated, the rate of variant development will decline, will naturally decline. So the hope is that we will not see the sort of anticipated surge after the few pandemics that we've had previously, not in our time, but historically, because of course there was not a vaccination. So
Yeah.
they rise due to variants. So now with the vaccine, with the modern medicine, we have a vaccination, and if we can get people vaccinated, stop people from getting sick, fingers crossed, we could have a very nice winter. We do have some worries. I don't think anybody can miss it. It's on the news and certainly coming through in the provider advisories. Lauren, I'm sure you've heard it already. There are worries with this, but so far so good. So I actually think I've been released from duty. I think I'm close to being done. Really happy, super happy. So I think that with the commercialization of the vaccination clinics, and they've gone over to private entities, and the reserve people aren't being called upon for it. And I think we've got something going on here. I think there's a real positive outlook but there's going to have to be town-wide publicity on masking, properly spacing. I think any of the small businesses and the larger stores, chain stores and small private industry are still going to have to be very careful with disinfecting, maintaining space, all of those sorts of things. But I think we're in for a good summer.
Oh, thank God.
So from
That having been said,
Thank
this,
God.
from our standpoint as a measurement and analytics committee, what are we doing, or what are we seeing that would allow us to quote reopen? And I'll tell you, I'm going to say this, for me personally, this is strictly opinion. But having gone to work every day since a year ago, and had to adapt to this, when do we get to a point? What indicators do we have to start seeing things like the public meetings in person again?
Yeah.
And what
So-
what are we measuring to
Right.
to indicate
So-
that?
So I think that, Jocelyn's point that the trend is definitely moving in the right direction, for sure. But we are still at COVID infection rates.
Was it zero?
They
Do you want-
were
is-
equal to what they were in May of last year. We're still seeing high rates. We're just coming off of a super high
Yeah.
rate. And I'd say, given the trend that we're seeing, I'd probably be very comfortable saying, we should all, and in fact, I've had this conversation with the council president. We ought to be thinking about getting back into the building. We ought to think about having.
I'm more concerned,
So-
we would have different thresholds probably. I just want to, is there a threshold and what what would we
So-
be comfortable with as a committee?
So the threshold isn't the point though. And that's sort of the point I'm saying. I could set a threshold. I'd feel comfortable saying if we get to rates that are lower than they were in May or June, if we get off of the high of the peaks early in the pandemic, we've come down off the highest of high peaks and we're below our historic high before that. We're not only moving in the right direction, but we are coming into a range that is below what we were worried about when we were worried the most. That having been said, these variants, whether it's the UK, the South Africa, the Brazilian, or now the California strain, scare the shit out of me. I shouldn't have said that on a recorded meeting, but they scare the shit out of me.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, and Rob, I'm going to tag you for just a minute. You're absolutely right, because who comes to see us in the summer but New York? And who is currently having the biggest explosion across the country? New York. They have the largest number of, they have a new variant that it was
New
announced tonight on the evening news. I haven't seen it yet on the provider updates, but it was announced on the news. There's a new variant and I have family, my children are in New York. So, of course, mom's eyeballs are glued to the television at that point. But I think that's,
I heard it's related to the South African.
yes, ma'am. I'm afraid I don't even want to say it, but I believe that I don't want to say it, but I
Yeah.
believe that may be true.
But what I don't want is for us to, so the policy for the town staff and for the town access to public buildings has been to try to do two things. Reduce the number of interactions happening in public space so as to open up the possibility statistically for more interactions in private space. Every time we didn't have someone talking to somebody in town hall meant that statistically we were reducing the transactions or interactions across the community so there could be another one at the coffee shop. We were freeing up the possibility of interaction by reducing the number of those interactions in public space. One. The second thing that we were trying to do was make sure that we weren't being the incubator.
Yeah.
Nobody wants the town employees to be the reason everybody gets sick. We control that. We don't have to be the incubation pod. We don't have to be the petri dish. And I'm afraid that if we come into the spring feeling relaxed, feeling like we're out of the long, miserable winter, we're going to behave differently now because we can. The release of spring is a real psychological thing. Suicides happen in the spring. They don't happen in the winter because people get out and they feel the release and they deal with stuff in a different way. That behavior change is not something I can predict. I don't know how that affects what we see at bars. I don't know how that affects what we see in public spaces. I don't know how that affects people who work for me if they're out on cruise. So I don't have a threshold is my point.
Then I would then recommend we not be discussing it on this group because if it's going to be about feelings and that kind of thing, then we can talk about that in other forums. It's not cases, it's not hospitalizations. We talked about some of these things before, but this group is not here to like bless a decision necessarily.
No.
So
I didn't ask you to.
Well, it's on the agenda and,
No, I didn't put it on the agenda, but
I did.
One thought I had just looking at this agenda item and thinking about how it could be relevant to us. You know, a lot of the decisions about what's open and what's not open is not coming from the town, right? It's coming from the state.
sure.
So, but I'm thinking about last summer, and one specific area that the town does have purview over has to do with the beaches. And I'm thinking about, I mean, and recognizing that it's not even March, so decisions about that might not need to be made immediately. But, you know, I was trying to think of what other areas the town would be making decisions around that relate to groups of people. You know, like I remember the picnic bench conversation of last summer. You know, if there are areas like that we can be useful to informing decisions that will need to be made as we approach the time of the year where visitors are coming in and services are being used outdoors, and how that might be managed, given that this is going to be an ongoing issue, then I think those would be interesting things for us to consider, because they're concrete and they could be grounded in some data. But I agree with Roland. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot else we can do as a committee to inform these other decisions.
We have a rental property in Wickford, and so we spend frequently we're up there in town, and we've been very impressed with the businesses and the sidewalk retail and the out all winter long through snow and ice and rain, and like mailmen, they constantly have their businesses up and running. I'd be interested in the economic data from the small businesses in Wickford, and how have they, I don't think there's been a closure. How have they thrived through the whole pandemic and a harsh winter and managed? But I think that, I don't know this, Rob, but I think that there's been new ordinances and rules about sidewalk dining and about use of town space to conduct business.
Yeah.
Frequently when we're up there, you know, clothing racks are outside, and waitresses and waiters are coming in and out with food and snacks and coffees and cocktails and
Yeah.
whatever. Tavern by the Sea has maintained their open deck space all winter long. So I don't know if it's possible to get that kind of data from their economic development committee.
We could, I was gonna say I went to school. I worked with Bjorn Wallenius at the World Bank, who is on the Economic Development Committee, and maybe he's the chair. I could certainly ask him to gather such data and come and talk to us.
Yeah, ping them.
I wonder how that would translate for us. Could we make?
Well, we've allowed outdoor dining. Tavern on Main has the permit to do it. It just doesn't seem to have worked the same way. I mean, they're different places. So
Right,
you know,
right.
I don't think that any rule exists that has prevented anybody, not Phil's, not Tavern on Main, any restaurant in Wakefield or anywhere else for that matter, from operating as they do in Wickford. I don't think there's a rule that's prevented that.
So maybe we just need to do a qualitative questionnaire to our businesses and say, what's obstructing you? Why do you think you're being obstructed? Because
Well, I don't know that.
do they think
Yeah, I don't know that they do. I don't know. They may.
Maybe that's question number one. Do you think you have a problem? Is there an obstructive thing that we could help you with that you could identify for us?
Yeah.
Maybe that's where we start. Because I've talked about this a lot. My next door neighbors were going away the January 1st, and we decided we were all going to go to Phil's together. And I said, oh my God, we're gonna have to go so early. It's gonna be so packed. It's always packed. Only 4 people in the restaurant at 10 o'clock in the morning on New Year's Day. That just can't continue. It's unsustainable.
Yep.
So what can we do to gather some data? Maybe a qualitative assessment first is, how are you feeling about your prospects for the summer, and what kind of things do you think you need? Do you see any roadblocks? And then maybe asking Wickford how they feel about things. Did they do anything different than us? I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Parent my husband a little bit.
Susan, the questionnaire that, we were talking with Brian and Jay, the last Economic Development Committee meeting we had about doing that questionnaire that we had put together. In fact, it was a couple of years ago at least. Do you think we could incorporate some of Jocelyn's questions into that? Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's trying to do a different thing. I think it would be burdensome for people to have to do that, the questionnaire we wrote 5 years ago, when all we want really is to know what they feel about the upcoming summer. Because we asked them, what are their plans for 5 years and how many
Yeah.
people do they employ? We don't want, there's a lot of stuff in there that is not what we're looking for right now. If what we're trying to find out is what's holding them back from figuring out ways to be open. So no, I don't think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Be interesting if it came back with all things that simply were not true and just needed to be corrected.
Yeah.
It would be a very interesting response to a questionnaire. Like, oh no, that's not true. We can help you do that. We can help you fix that. It would be good to know that,
Yeah.
helpful to know that.
The thing is, there's not very much time between now and the start of the season to think those things through well enough to ask them, unless it really is just 5 questions or something.
I could try to frame something together between now and our next meeting. If you think that would be helpful, I'd have to talk with my husband a little bit about it because I'm a very good nurse practitioner. I'm not a business owner.
Yeah.
So I, would have to ask and maybe reach out to Larry and a couple of other people on the Economic Development Committee to see if they have any particular questions. I mean, it could be just a point and click with a fill in blank that we could get maybe Joe Viale to send out through the
Yeah.
chamber, something like that.
No, Lauren, that might be a really good starting point for the chamber.
Yeah. Yeah. They'd certainly be of assistance, and then bring it back and say, well, this is what people see as obstructions to an economic recovery. Is, first of all, is it true? And then secondly, what can we do to assist
Yeah.
in some way?
Okay.
So before we leave this, though, I just want to come back to Roland's point. If there are metrics or measures that the committee or anyone on the committee thinks the town should be using as sort of triggers for policy changes, I'm all ears. I'd love to hear them. I mean, you're right. I end up relying on heuristics because there is no established criteria. There is no metric here that I can rely on.
Right, and that's part of what a business owner and especially in a retail setting will tell you is that the biggest thing we've done is taken hope away from our customers. And when they they're afraid to go to Phil's or they're afraid to do these types of things for good reason in several cases, but those are the biggest problems. And if we're at a point now where we're a year into this and you've seen the memes, it's like 2 weeks, we're 1 year into 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That, it's taken 50 weeks to do what was originally said is going to be 2. Now, every time you push back one of these things, I remember the pause came out and they said just a 2-week pause. The governor said that. And then every business owner that I talked to at that point said, this will be at least 6 weeks. So we're at a point where the absence of some visible endpoint, even if it's just a number, is still squashes. All I hear is that these things aren't going away. We and some people from the very beginning knew that they had to deal with them. So if they're not going to go away, and then there's going to be a part of the community that doesn't have to deal with it because we can stand on or sit in our laptops and do virtual meetings or work from home. And then there's a small slice so dramatically affected. There's no amount of aid that helps somebody who lost all their customers. They have to change their life, and a $600 check, like those things are, and so that's why if we're going to say there needs to be something that they can see. I don't know. I mean, the
we've
governor
gone
tried to
from
do some of
we've
those
gone from
things.
A conversation about the need for hard metrics to a conversation about the need to work group psychology, which, you know, is hard. I don't know how to do this.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to, I'm thinking about Roland's statement. And I'm thinking back to the moment that Brickley's closed because of the flagrant
incident, yeah.
refusal
Yeah,
of out-of-staters to abide by, at that point, state-imposed social distancing and masking requirements. And there were children, basically, young adults manning the counter, and it became close to an assaultive situation, and the owners went, done. How could we help with that? How could the town, is there a police officer that's assigned to downtown, particularly Friday nights, Saturdays and Sundays, who could do a walking patrol and maintain order that way? I don't even know that. I don't even know that. But is that something that could be a possibility? Is there a volunteer corps of adults that could, you know, is there a volunteer corps of adults that could support
So
somehow?
the answer to the question is yes. I mean, we could certainly have put police, if we think back to that incident, we could have put police on Main Street at the time. But you remember at the time, that was sparking a very strong reaction.
Yeah.
A police officer would have been seen as Big Brother imposing social distancing. It would not have been seen as, gee, he's here to help us. It would not have been a good thing.
I'm sort of hoping now that may have moved forward. Our collective thinking may have moved forward. And I don't even know if that's a good suggestion, Rob. I'm, you know, kind of thinking it forward, thinking about these, as Roland said, the pandemic has removed a customer base. What resources do we have at the town level, and what do the business owners want? What do the businesses identify?
I think it's a good idea for us to ask businesses what they think the biggest challenges are as they come into the summer. I think that's helpful for us to know. I don't know that what I think I know is correct, so I think that's a useful exercise. I worry about asking that in the wrong frame. I worry about asking questions about what is it that government's doing wrong that'll make your life better if they stop doing it. I don't know that that's a helpful way to come at this problem. But if we ask people, what are the challenges, what are the barriers to your success that you see, and government happens to be one of them, and you know we have concrete information, we can change that. That's fine. That's good. Let's do that. But I think we have to be broader than just what policies do you need to see changed. Tell me all the ways you hate Gina and Rob.
No. That would not be.
No, I think just asking them, what do they see as the obstacles would be what's preventing them from.
Right. I think that's
What are they
useful.
worried about as they head into the summer or something?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that's
Just
useful.
asking them what supports they could use.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is a different way of, instead of saying like, what's the government doing that's getting, causing you problems, is saying,
No,
what
we're not.
supports do you need? And that could be from
Yeah.
the government, that could be from the community, it could be from so many different places.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. I think that's helpful too. I don't mind asking people, what is it that we can do to help? I think that's good. That we have to be careful about that because people often come at that question with answers that are very difficult to work with.
But it's good to know, like from like a qualitative data perspective, if you're doing stakeholder work like this, what we're talking about, it's like a needs assessment. And even if it's just impossible to provide certain supports because it's just structurally or policy wise or financially, it'd be really helpful to know what the business owners are saying they need. And that could open up some new ways of thinking about supporting the community that we just haven't even considered.
Yeah. No, that's good.
You don't have to make any promises by asking the question, but asking the question introduces.
That's two questions.
That's,
Yeah, we're not saying what are your supports and we're going to provide them for you. We're just saying what supports do you need, and then we can look at, we can do a thematic analysis of these responses. And I mean, even if it's just a report back to the town council about what we're hearing
yeah.
from the businesses, I think that would be incredibly useful. I think it'd be useful for them to think about, because maybe it could influence policy making.
I agree. I think that is a useful tool. So I think that if we could get a survey out, or even if it were focus groups, even if you just had some sort of copious note taking and thematic, review of those, that might be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you could record the audio from a focus group and have, I don't know who you would have transcribe them, but you can do transcription. Yeah. I have access to software that can do the thematic analysis, but not the, I guess it could maybe do the transcription, but.
The transcription, it's funky. I don't know if you've seen these transcripts. They do transcribe these recordings, but they're.
Yeah, this is like a little bit more high, it's called NVivo. It's a little bit more high level than maybe most people have access to, but yeah.
I would just suggest keeping the survey, I think that's what people are saying, just keeping the survey kind of simple, because given the fact that maybe what people really are thinking or what they want, it really is not able to be met. Don't have them invest a lot of time, but I do think it would be good to get the pulse of what's going on out there. And I just want to say, I think all the government announcements I always heard was always, we can do this in the future if people do, these other things. And really the problem really wasn't with the government. It really was the people being resistant to doing what would needed to be done. So that's what makes so much of these predictions and policies really challenging, because it's okay, if everybody does this, then we can do this. And nobody wants the mandates. And so then people don't do it, and we're all dealing with the consequences of it.
Yeah, it's going to be a summer of that, I'm afraid. That's my only worry.
So just to end this discussion with some numbers, the current vaccinations in Rhode Island are 65 and above. The municipalities were asked to take the lead on 75 and above because they're a very difficult population to reach. So we've been making phone calls for weeks now to every 75-year-old or older that we could get a phone number for. And we have vaccinated 800 of our seniors over the age of 75. We have another clinic coming up on Saturday. There are 106 or 110 people registered for that. We have another 250 registered for Sunday of this coming week. We are working on lists for the 3rd and the 14th, and it is our expectation that by the 14th, everyone 75 and above, a population of 2,900 people, will be vaccinated in South Kingstown. We actually have some reason to believe that we're going to hit the 2,900 before we get to our last clinic on the 14th. We're seeing a lot of people calling us back now and saying, I don't need the appointment. I've already got it at CVS, or I've already gotten it at the state site, or I've already gotten it out of state in some cases. So we're seeing that population get the vaccine very quickly now. The 65-year-olds and above, the 65 to 74 year group is going slower. The primary vaccination channel for that group is CVS and Walgreens at this point. The state is standing up their facilities. There is one that is scheduled to be set up in West Kingston, run by the National Guard. They're saying April, I'm saying as soon in March as possible. We'll see who's right when we get to the finish line. They're trying like hell to move that date up. We're urging them to do it as much as possible because the South Road vaccination clinic is pretty much played out. I mean, the volunteers are burnt out. You can only ask people to come out for so many day-long events, and we've just basically exhausted the local talent of volunteers who can give shots. So that clinic is pretty much, I mean, we're looking at the last one being March 14th. If the Army National Guard can't get the site up until April 1st, then we're going to hold out and we're going to push for vaccinations through South Road until April. But I hope like heck we don't have to, because we really are sort of burnt out on it.
I've had 2 calls from the emergency, dial thing.
Yes, yeah,
Had
we
2 of them.
we've tried everything we can to let folks know. It's the 75 plus is a really difficult population. They don't really all have computers. They're not online regularly. They don't necessarily have email. They don't answer their phone. It's a tricky, they don't trust the people who call because they've been scammed. It's a really tough population to work with. We're getting there, and they're getting vaccinated, and I have no doubt that we will have gotten through the 75 plus population in March, before the end of March, at least here in South Kingstown.
Great.
So, can we go back to the survey for a second? Are we going to put together a survey? Do we have a plan for that?
Well, I'm happy to go down to the chamber and solicit their ideas and put some thoughts down and bring it. I mean, I hate to wait a whole month.
Is it possible to have like 2 or 3 of us kind of take the lead and work on that over the month without breaking OMA?
Yes, you can do a task force to work on a work product. You really can't engage in conversation with anyone else, and you can't make final editing decisions. It's got to be the body's decision.
Sure, I was thinking like a couple people work on that and then bring at least a draft of it to the meeting next month.
And you can move your
can talk
meeting
to
up if you wanted to, or you could do almost anything on timeline if you need to.
Okay.
But we
Rob,
can talk to each other, right? Rob, we can talk to each other.
Yeah.
Yes,
The 2 or
I
3
mean,
of us can.
Look, this is an advisory committee. This is not a rule-making committee. It's not a committee that makes decisions about property rights or anything like that. You're in a bit of a different place than like a town council or a planning board or a zoning board. That having been said, open meetings violations happen when a majority of a public body get together and discuss a matter of public interest. So you cannot have that meeting by talking to each individual member of the committee separately and sharing all the information among yourselves. But if 2 or 3 of you get together and sort of puzzle through how a survey questionnaire goes and come back to the committee and say, this is our work product, what do you think? You're going to be fine with that. That's okay.
Okay, Rob, to have them move forward, do we need a motion? And do we have to
No,
vote on it? You
Not
do?
necessarily.
All right.
Can we
Shouldn't we let John Paul speak? We should have done him in the advisory, he didn't have to sit here through all this meeting. He was the other committees. We were going to hear from him the first item on the agenda, right?
I'm sorry, Gene. I
think we should go back to the first item.
What do you want me to respond to?
all of it? What do you think?
No, I thought
I
we
don't
had,
know. My energies are in the assessment world and market value and what's going on with the real estate market. My job is assessment and tangible assessments and motor vehicle assessments. Other than that, I don't know if I'm all that informed on a lot of what's being discussed here. I have lots of observations, but I don't know if my knowledge is deep enough to.
So Gene,
Yeah.
a a couple of things that I think might be of interest to the committee. One, can you describe the information sets that you have in your office? What do you have in databases that are accessible to the public in particular, but what do you have that's not accessible to the public? What information do you have that?
Well, what we have is real estate related. I
Mhm.
mean, the bulk of our tax roll is the single family home. But when we do assessments, we have, we have sketches of each building that's in town, the size of it. On residential stuff, it's the living square footage, the effective age of the building. It gets pretty basic after that. I mean, we describe the what kind of style of home they have, components of the construction like exterior siding, roof covering, the heating type, central air, bathroom counts, bedroom counts, decks, porches, patios, and that kind of thing. But the bulk of the assessment is really based on the condition, the quality of construction, and the living square footage. And that is compared, all that information is compared to sales that take place every 3 years. We do revaluations, and they look at the sale prices and they treat every property with new assessments based on those sale prices that take place. We're in the midst of, we're not in the midst of, we're in the beginning stages of doing the 2021 reval, a full reval where people will be going around to homes and not trying to gain access with this reval, but just verifying exterior measurements and doing a knock on the door and seeing if anybody is home and verifying interior data, which we already have. Other than that, we send out tangible filings every year, asking businesses to complete the form, which is basically the equipment that they have to run the business, the year of acquisition, the cost, and then it's depreciated based on the age. Those tangible reportings are not public information. So I'm not
Dean,
sure we can give what.
Let me ask a couple of questions about that, because you've got a lot of interesting information right there. So just on the characteristics of the housing stock, how queryable is that data? Can you tell me, for example, what year was it when we flipped from being a 1-bathroom majority community to a 2-bathroom majority community? Probably in the 50s, but when can you query on this?
We'd have to run reports. I can go back to extract data about 3 revals.
Okay.
So that's about 9 years ago. So I just have to pull reports based on what was the bedroom and bathroom counts.
Like Gene gave me the bedroom counts all the way back to 2013 for the data that I showed last week.
Okay.
So it's a pretty queryable information set. You can actually do things like pull the bedroom count for the entire inventory, the bathroom count for the entire inventory,
right?
The average bathrooms for the entire inventory, or for a portion of the inventory. Sure, you could. You could pull it for West Kingston versus Kingston.
I'm trying to think how we could call that out.
You'd use Carroll's GIS and address data, right?
Yeah.
But can you do, those are numbers, how many bathrooms, how many bedrooms? Can you do it for, I mean, a lot of the things that you mentioned are not numeric, like the style and components of structures, the condition, quality of construction. I mean, I don't know whether we'd ever want that, but that kind of stuff, I don't think you can't get that. Most of the time, don't they say average? Isn't average kind of the default answer for that?
I'm not sure what your question is, average as opposed to
Or
relates to
average
what?
for condition and for the condition of the house, isn't that almost always just average?
Well,
So
no, it's a
I guess-
grade that's applied. It's a different numerical grade that's applied to the house.
Oh, it
based
is
on
a
age.
numerical, okay, it's a numerical grade. Okay, so that, I guess that answers my question. So I was thinking those things like the components of structures and things would, I don't know how you'd query for that.
What is
I
it?
wanted to know how many houses in town were colonial or how many were modern or something. Could we find that out from?
Yes, yeah, we can. I mean, we have that in the database, the style of the dwelling. I mean, we could pull it out, but
Yeah, I'm not saying
I'm
it.
curious, how is that helpful?
We're
We're just trying to understand what's there and what can be
I'm just
gotten
trying to
out.
understand what's there. I'm not saying it would be helpful.
I mean, yeah, we can, the living square footage, the style of the house, the quality of construction, but
Gene, what
you
about
know,
dating? I mean, the average house in South Kingstown, the date, it's phenomenal. The average age or the average date of construction is something like 1929. I mean,
yeah, we have a lot of old
yeah,
dwellings, but the effective age of those dwellings are much newer because the
right.
people
So that's the question. Can we track when those were updated? Do we have?
Yeah, we have the effective age of each dwelling in town, and
Okay.
we also have the estimated age of when it was built.
Mhm. Yep.
So that's what effective age means. It's when it was
The
renovated.
effective age is, you know, I mean, as Jocelyn knows, I lived in a house that was 130 years old for many years on Orchard Avenue, and I think the house was built in 1880. And but effectively, it wasn't an 1880 house. I mean, it had electricity and bathrooms and heat, and
Okay.
effectively, it was more of a 1970s, 60s house, maybe 50s.
A pretty special house.
Yeah, yeah, we have a lot of fond memories of that house. Yeah.
So Gene, what about the tangibles? You say that the raw data are not public, but can we run reports and
Yeah,
say,
I mean, with tangibles, what they report, the equipment that they report is not public information but I mean, we can have a report of, this is a very touchy thing, the tangibles.
Mhm.
It's hard information to get, and a lot of businesses, it's not a popular form to return to the assessor's office. It's a self-reporting form.
That's an understatement.
I got to admit, it's my least favorite tax, although I don't like any taxes, but it's a self-reporting form, and a lot of people are very diligent and forthcoming and open about it, reporting it, but some people are not. I get a lot of flowery language telling me what I can do with it.
Gene, could we run reports on, let's say, the age of equipment by industry?
The only thing I have in my database, we figure out what the total reporting is. So I have the name of the business and what the total assessment is. On
We don't
that
have the age of the equipment.
tangible form.
Yeah.
We don't
Much
break down,
information.
it's reported, but it's not in our database. Because what's reported by year, we're only interested in the total of the
Right.
category that we're asking for.
So if I was interested in knowing whether there's more industrial equipment in South Kingstown today than there was in South Kingstown 5 years ago, we couldn't answer that question using the database.
No, I couldn't pull that out. Not industrial as opposed to,
If I wanted to answer the question, are law offices using older computers today than they did 5 years ago? Could I answer that question?
It doesn't go to the, I don't have that level of detail.
Yeah.
I have the totals.
Okay,
By the name of the business, but they report
yeah,
on
it doesn't
individual
sound like a
lines.
particularly
We just
useful.
tally up the total.
Okay,
So I
And then
have
the
a
only-
question. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean
Yeah,
to.
go ahead.
I have some interest in what the qualities of the buildings are in areas where we spend the most amount of municipal dollars. I have interest in I don't even know if this is a logical question that I'm asking. Are the homes and businesses in a hotspot where we spend more than an expected amount of municipal funds in terms of fire, rescue, police, road clearance, repairs, whatever? Is it possible, once we figure out a way, this is a question I asked a long time ago on this committee, I think it was the first or second meeting. Is it possible to look at where we should be investing municipal funds in order to upgrade a neighborhood to reduce our municipal expenditures? That's my point. So if we had those expenditures that we could find out from a different department and then came to you and said, gee, it looks like we spend a lot of municipal money in this one area. Can you tell me about the buildings and structures within that area? Could you do that about the buildings and structures within a defined geographic area?
yeah, we can bound anything in Gene's database with geography. We can always take the GIS and plug in the values or the age or anything he's described, be boxed into a polygon on a GIS map.
Yeah, I remember, Jocelyn, when you raised that, and I thought that was pretty interesting because that would be something to consider, see what it showed when you did that analysis.
Being married to a builder has its assets. One of the things he's always said is you need to invest heavily in your most neediest neighborhoods in order to raise your entire community.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious. I remain curious about that, I guess is what I'm saying. I remain curious about where we expend the most amount of municipal funding and how we could alleviate that burden on the municipal funds by perhaps investing some capital reserves and raising the level of.
Interesting thought.
I'm not married to a builder, but I'm interested in that just for whatever equity issues it might show up as well.
Yeah.
So the place to start that conversation is definitions. You don't mean spending money at Matunic Beach, at the town beach, because we spend a lot of money at the town beach, right? But
well, it also depends on the reason for spending the money. It would depend on the reason. So, Matunic Town Beach may actually end up becoming a huge issue as we talk about beach erosion and how much are we going to spend? I think that's an interesting question in and of itself, a different question, but a question. It's
So
not the point I'm driving at right now. I'm thinking
Right.
more about our more poverty-stricken areas and our needier areas.
yeah,
And whether or not we need to invest, whether or not there are repairs that the town could take on in order
Right.
to raise the standard of living in
But-
those areas.
but you've got to define that because again, we're going to spend $3 million on a seawall next to the ocean mist.
I know.
That costs more than we're going to spend in Peacedale in the next 5 years. It
Oh,
just,
I agree.
so you've got to define this so it means something when you get to the data set.
So the answer right now is yes, Gene, you could pull, if I had a geographic area defined by investment of specific municipal funds, you could pull out what those buildings and structures were like in that area, whether they were average or below standard or above standard. You could do that. Sounds like. I think.
I think so.
I think the other idea that example about the seawall in Matunic is you could back out a certain project or certain small geographical area within a larger geographical area, so you don't get those skewed results too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what kind of municipal expenditures could we reduce by making repairs, and what ones are fixed or growing? You know, like, I'm not sure the beach problem's ever going to get better. I think that's something that's going to be an annual thing, but I think that the benefit to the community and the benefit to the tourist industry economically is important. The thing I'm looking at is quality of life and expenditure that way.
I think there's a lot of preparation work to be done there. I think there's something there. I just don't know what it is, because I look at our expenditure pattern, you know, the pattern that I have in my head, the map I've got in my head. And it doesn't seem to be the sort of thing that's gonna yield, unless you're honing in on things like police calls. That's not expenditures, that's police calls. It really is. I mean, yes, we can put a budget to it, but it's not that. It's just police calls. It's not the cost. It's the number of police interventions. So I don't know that the expenditure map. I don't know. My sense is the expenditure map is just going to be really clunky. It's going to be 3 million here. It's going to be money on, street signs and road construction in random ways across town, because we do big projects in various parts of town as part of our regular road construction. We'd have to define what we mean by what is a meaningful public expenditure for this purpose.
I'll send you the research that sparked this conversation months long before we had a pandemic that diverted all of our attention.
Yeah, even things like where we spend money on roads, it might tell you. I bet we aren't putting roads in some of the neighborhoods that I'd be interested in seeing some.
The challenge though is that it's probably it's probably a 30-year road program. It probably takes 30 or 40 years to cycle through the entire town. So when you look at it at any one, you take the snapshot, you're not necessarily gonna have anything that's really that useful. Maybe. I mean, you may be right. It may be that we just don't fix potholes, and that's not true. I mean, it's just not true. I don't know.
It's not a right or wrong thing. It was more a curiosity thing for me, satisfying if I had the data that answered it exactly the way you just did, I would be satisfied. But I don't have that data, so I'm curious. How do we spend our municipal funds, and is there anything we can do to remediate excessive expenditures in any particular areas in town and raise the quality of life in that particular area? I think that's probably the question in my head, not well stated, but in my head.
Yep.
So I'll send you the research that I have on it that sparked the question.
Yep. So it does sound like it may be tied closer to public safety stuff, emergency medical calls, and
road safety, walking, healthy people, healthy spaces by design. Can they access healthy spaces by design? No, there's a little bit more to it, but it's, but I'll wrap it up for you.
But the correlation between, the correlation between poverty, poor health, and medical services, it's there.
Right.
It's there.
Okay, can we move on?
We letting Mr. Bouchard log off?
Yeah. Jean Paul, I think we're all set with you.
But you don't have to go.
You don't have to, of course. You're perfectly welcome to
stay.
So before he leaves, I will let everyone on the committee know that everybody here does owe Gene a debt of gratitude, at least, because Gene did run the special report that was the basis for the analysis that Jason presented last week or last month.
Thank you, Gene.
he did take a big chunk of time and put some effort into getting data that this committee was able to make use of. So thank you, Gene.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Okay.
Wait a minute, he did say he had some observations about the meeting. Do you want to share any of those as you sign off? You could do it really
Well,
quickly, please.
I'm leery of shooting out my observation. I'm leery of shooting out my observations because, frankly, I don't know if it means anything or not. I'll tell you one. We were talking about restaurants. Every time during this pandemic, I went by the bowling alley and the lot was empty, and I've lived in this town for so long. I mean, I went to high school here. It would really be a blow to me emotionally. I'd see this empty lot. And I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I went by there and it was packed. And I was stunned. But I don't know what that means. I mean, I'm sure if I talked to Bob Toth and asked him how business was, he wouldn't give me a favorable comment. But it was visually, it was a very uplifting thing to see, to see all that activity at the bowling alley. I hope it's an indication of, of good things. I mean, I by the same token, I hope everybody in there is being careful and, but I mean, the bowling alley is almost like a center of activity for the town.
Yeah.
And seeing that was really, I'm going to try to drive by every couple of days here.
Well, Jean-Paul, I'll tell you, I also went to high school here, so I went into the bowling alley to find out what was going on. And what it was kids from the high school, their physical education class was bowling. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. So there were a lot of kids in there as part of the phys ed training that was doing that. I do know that Bobby's done quite a bit of work to make sure all of his tables are socially distant from one another.
Yeah.
And also you pretty much, he's limiting the number of people that can sit together. And then in the last pause, I mean, there was a group of us that used to go out every Wednesday morning, and we stopped because we don't all live together. Even though we've known each other all our lives, we don't live together. And so we better, take a pause ourselves from getting together. So hopefully we can start doing that again in April. But he's been extremely careful. And none of us want to see him get into any kind of trouble with the state or anything.
Yeah. Do you go there? Have you been in there early in the morning? Because I know you used to have a big morning crowd.
Yeah, it has the usuals there,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what year you graduated, but I go in at just
1902.
What?
1968.
So I graduated in 1970. You remember Ray Johnson then?
I sure do.
Yeah, Ray Johnson's in there every Wednesday morning, 10 o'clock.
Is he?
Yeah, he looks great.
Yeah, he won 3 state basketball championships for South Kingston High School, which is very pertinent to the smart committee conversation right now.
Oh yeah,
Statistically, it is.
Okay.
It's nice. That's a good memory. That's a good story.
Yeah. Okay, can we move on, please? Okay, item D. It's a follow-up. Jason did, an incredible job putting together a lot of data regarding the school system. And he passed out his presentation. And I did have a chance to look at it. And I was wondering, is there any follow-on discussion from Jason's presentation or commentary?
there was a question that Rob had brought up about whether the in and out migration data could have been just had a glitch in it or something. And I looked through the details of it. I did not see anything that would suggest that. I don't know. I don't know what I would really to look for, but nothing popped out at me as being strange. I don't know if anyone else has had a chance or may have a chance over the next month to look at that as well, but that was
Very interesting information. I think one of the things that impressed me was the decline in population. You know, for the schools. I mean, the number of kids entering the schools, it is just going down. So it's sending a message, and the message is that the younger generation, like my kids or Jean Paul's kids, they can't afford to live here because they can't afford any of the housing. And I mean, all I hear that from my two kids is, how can we ever buy anything here? There's just nothing available. And whatever is available is very, very expensive. And the buyers are paying cash for it, which is kind of crazy. But the thing is, and the over 55 housing that's going in with Roland Fiore's development in South Shore. I mean, there's no kids there. There's no kids at Tuckertown Village. You know, so what it means is the population demographics that Jason talked to is shifting, you know, to an older population. And the one
that was one of the big takeaways for me when I first saw it was that I'd known that there was a net migration decrease over the past 2 to 3 years, where overall, if we look at population in the school in second grade versus first grade the previous year and so on, there used to be a net increase, and over the past couple of years has been a net decrease. And what popped out was that according to the data that I got from the school district, that decrease is not due to people leaving, it's due to less people moving in.
Yeah.
It's not due to people, you know, fleeing the district. The same number of people are leaving the district every year that always have, but there's been a pretty extreme drop in the number of students moving into the district.
Yeah, is that influx issue that what we're seeing there, is that because whoever is moving in doesn't have any children?
It could be, yeah. I mean, it's families with children are not moving in at the same rate that they used to.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty clear. And yeah, I don't know if there's a, I mean, is it the trend of out of state, you know, people buying housing because it's cheap for them.
Yeah.
To move in from
just to that point, we were just going over these data looking to prepare the budget, and we were already beyond our prediction for real estate conveyance taxes and recording fees by about a quarter. We're a quarter over what we had predicted. The buying in 2020 has been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. We're going to end up with a surplus from what we predicted in revenue of probably $225,000 on what we had predicted to be about 450,000. Just big transactions, lots of transactions, expensive sales.
Yeah, and cash.
Well, I wonder if the conversation, you know, can evolve, you know, because there is a supply and demand, and you know, part of the supply is parcels of property being preserved, which most people are for, but it does take potential housing stock because the houses won't be built on those preservation pieces. But then the other big piece, which you know, Henry's kind of bringing up, is, you got Tuckertown Village, you've got South Shore. The name of that plat, so I wonder if we can get into almost kind of, I don't know if that's something that Gene would be able to help us with or not, but could we get into, if all those units didn't have the 55 plus
Restriction, yeah.
restriction, what would our community look like? And I'm not, I mean, to be clear, I'm not saying,
Right.
oh, well, let's turn Warden's Pond into, housing under 50. I'm not talking about that, but I'm just saying, if it can we get into an analysis, because it may help inform policymakers as to how they want to see either, I mean, it could be, you're not going to turn Tuckertown Village into something different, but whether it's redevelopment, because I know town council has talked about redeveloping certain parcels or certain areas to have different uses, or undeveloped land, because I think if we can get more of a handle on, what we've missed out on in terms of children, I'm just using words, I'm not attributing anything more than just using words, but it may inform, what happens over the next 10 or 20 years.
Yeah. So the whole affordable housing issue, the whole idea of remedying the school district's declining population by accelerating the construction of affordable housing, it's an interesting conversation, but we're dealing with market forces that are really, really big. This is not something that, town council bond for $10 million or $20 million or $50 million is going to solve. You're not going to be able to deal with this very long established pattern in one fell swoop. These are market, look, even forget Tuckertown and forget, South County or South Shores, whatever the hell it's called. Forget those 55 restricted. What's happening in the general marketplace without any restrictions, without any requirements on them, is that people are coming in looking at the relative value and buying because they want a retirement home. That has nothing to do with restrictions. It's just a market phenomena. People are coming here because they like it here and they don't happen to have kids. People with kids are finding it difficult to buy, or even if it's not impossible, the average home now is $400,000 in South Kingstown. If you can get something for $325 or $350 in Richmond and have extra money for the weekends, that's a choice. And people are making that choice. We're not going to drive real estate prices entirely by government policy. We just can't. The market more power here than government intervention, I would suggest.
I agree with the general, there's really, there's part of what you said that I personally agree with, and part, there is an impact.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right that there are general market forces. We live in a beautiful area where people come to vacation. So anytime you live in an area where people think is a getaway, you're not going to change that. And I think people in the community understand that. And so I'm just talking in the context of
Right.
trying to quantify what has happened,
Right.
to inform what will happen.
Well,
So
to Jonathan's point, it would be interesting to know just how many deeds, are those 55 and over, are they deed restricted things?
Probably.
Yeah.
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 So could
Well,
you just,
it goes to planning. They're approved as 55 and over, as a development. So
but there's no restriction, you can't, when they come to sell, do they have to sell to somebody who's 55 and older, or can they sell to anybody?
yeah, it's typically 55 and over, yes. But they're approved as a project as 55 and over. So that is traditionally followed. Policing it is another story. I mean, there's been a couple of years ago, there were some were discovered that weren't 55, and it was addressed by the planning department, but those are kind of rare.
Well, so it would be kind of interesting to know how much of the town, I mean, I don't know what you do with it again, but how much of the town is deed restricted? How much of it is 55 and over, and how much of it is restricted?
Yeah.
Dean,
Affordable?
do you know how many units there are that are restricted off the top of your head, ballpark?
Oh, God, I don't know. I mean, there's deed restricted, it's in condominiums.
No. Yeah,
So
55, just 55 and over. How many units do we have that are restricted to 55? and over?
I'd have to look into it, but my guess it's probably in the neighborhood of 300 to 400 or 500.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we have 10,000 units.
Okay.
Yes.
Does that count in our affordable housing calculation or not?
No.
No, because they're not necessarily affordable units. Oh, they do count in our calculation, but they count as market rate units.
They count as market rate units.
Well, they are market rate, yeah.
Well, suppose they were market, so in order to count in the 10% affordable housing, it has to be designated affordable housing. It can't just be within the price range of
It
affordable.
has to be deed restricted
Deed restricted.
for 20
Deed
years.
restricted to
Yeah.
count in that 10%. So
Yeah,
if
and
you have
I've,
$350,000 home sitting next door to another
Yes.
350,000, but only one is deed restricted, that's the only one that counts. This one
that's
doesn't count.
correct.
Understood.
That's correct. And what's more, I've demonstrated through an analysis last year that the number of units that sell below the dollar amount, which I think was 279, the year I did the analysis, 279 was the price that you had to be able to buy a property that would be deed restricted in order for it to count as a deed restricted property. There are hundreds of market rate, not deed restricted, that are below that sales price throughout town. We don't get credit for them because they're not deed restricted. So there's two funky things that happen because of the state policy. Builders build luxury homes in places like, I don't know, East Matunic had some not too long ago built. And one or two of them has to be sold as a lower moderate income unit. Retired couple, no income, plenty of cash to pay for the purchase, that unit counts as a lower moderate income one. We've seen cases where parents come in and pay cash for a unit for the kid who's going to URI, no income, low income unit, voila, it's a low income unit. On the other hand, you've got people who are working class folks who are trying to get ahead in life, and they've got a choice. They can live in a neighborhood where they buy a unit that sells for $279,000, but doesn't have a deed restriction, fix it up and make money and improve their family's economic situation. They can buy the deed restricted one for $279, but they can never make a profit on it, or the profit is going to be capped by program income.
That's what's wrong with those deed restrictions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
Because how does the middle class get rich in this country or have security? It's through selling their houses. When they-
Appreciation in real estate has been one of the primary ways that people build wealth.
It legitimately is the purest form of oppression I've ever seen.
It is terrible.
It is terrible. It legitimately, I
I wouldn't have gone there, but okay.
would.
No,
Because you know
it's
what?
really terrible.
We started with absolutely nothing. We had this in our pockets when we got married 42 years ago. I cannot imagine what our lives would have been if we hadn't had the opportunity to
So-
buy, fix, sell, buy, fix, sell, buy, fix, sell. That
So
was our life.
my focus in this area, and I'd love some feedback from this committee or anybody else, is that I think that we've got to shift some attention to the acquisition and restoration of existing low and moderate income units. They're all over the place. You drive around South Kingstown and you see small bungalows, you see, Cape Cod, that are, you see tarps. I mean, you see tarps on roofs quite often.
Yeah.
Those are low and moderate income units. They still are selling. Yeah, yes, the average home is valued at $400,000, but there's a lot of stuff that is not the average cost. There's a lot of units out there. Figuring out how to bring those into the low and moderate income regime and making sure that people have access to those properties and making sure that people have access to the capital and the skills and the abilities necessary to actually make those safe and affordable units, I think is an important part of what we need to be doing.
Okay, so to Jocelyn's point before, maybe what we ought to do is we ought to map all the houses that are less than $279,000 in their assessed value, which we can learn from Gene.
Yeah.
And we ought to try and get, this is an opportunity for people who
We've
don't
got
want
that map.
restriction.
But is it an opportunity for people if they have to go into a deed restricted program?
No deed restrictions.
No deed restrictions. So
No
keep
deed restrictions.
how's it gonna fit
Well,
in our
we're-
penalty of we don't
right.
have
So if
10%.
Oh, well, we don't
Exactly.
care about that.
We
Well,
don't
no,
have
that's
power.
exactly right, though. We can't count those units, no matter how much we try, against the state 10%. And
So
then,
we get the builders who are building high-end things, they're the ones who have to come up with just force them to do this. The deed restrictions and let
this is
everybody
the other
else.
form of oppression.
Yes,
It's crazy. Absolutely.
But what's the old joke is, the difference between capitalism and communism is that in capitalism, you've got man exploiting man. And in communism, it's just the opposite.
All right.
okay.
Okay.
Well, I would like to see all the properties that are available for under 279 or that are evaluated.
I
unless-
would too.
So would I.
I would too. And who's in them and would they, and
Yeah.
what would motivate them to go? What would motivate them to move?
One strategy we've explored, and the state doesn't want to give us any leeway on this, is to say, look, one of our major problems is making sure that elderly people can stay in their homes. If elderly people are willing to put a deed restriction so that when they surrender title by whatever means, if they surrender title, it's going to be a deed restricted unit. We won't tax them on the property forever. That's it. Deed restricted. You don't have to worry about taxes. And the low moderate income person who's in it now, the elderly owner, counts, and it counts for the next 20 years. They get a tax benefit, and we've improved their circumstances in life because they're not saddled with the tax bill. They don't have to worry about the appreciation or the assessment or what have you.
Does the clock start ticking as soon as they turn it
The
over?
state won't let us do it because they say you're converting a market rate unit into an affordable unit, and that's not what we want. We want construction of new units.
Yeah, and then they put in a ton of regulations that makes it very oppressive to try to do.
Right. So it's a tricky problem.
Yeah. Okay. I think moving on, please. Item F. No, I'm sorry. Item E. Susan and I talked about that.
There's nothing to report.
Yeah, so there's nothing to report with that.
F.
Now, I put item F on here, the town's 300-year anniversary. And the reason why I put it on here is because Larry assigned me the task of researching what happened at the 250th anniversary. Now, I was around then, of course, and John Paul was around then, and I had forgotten how big it was. But this ended up being almost, I mean, I have the newspaper articles. I'm going to start data mining. This town had 50,000 people show up to participate in our festivities. And it involved huge parades, and it involved all sorts of cookouts, a formal ballroom dance at URI. And the one thing that I got a kick out of is not politically correct today, but they had the Miss South County contest. And So with that many people showing up, and the kinds of questions are, if we're going to have numbers that are that big, where are they going to park? How do we control that many people in the town? How many outhouses do we have to have? And on and on and on and on. And the committee, an interesting thing about the committee, because I knew most of them have since passed away, had over 35 people that the council appointed. So there's quite a bit of work around this. If the town wants to have a major 300th anniversary. And I think it's important, as part of my data mining, is to get the numbers of people, events, number of days, times, potential for additional police. Of course, there's, in these particular parades, you have every fire truck in Rhode Island that'll be there. But all of this can get very unwieldy, but it can also be a tremendous economic boom to the town. So that's the only reason why I put this on this agenda. More than anything is to inform of the work that I'm doing at the Economic Development Commission at Larry's behest. Okay, Rob, you look scared already.
No, actually, the council had asked us to give them some recommendations on setting up a committee for the 350. So I was just typing an email off to Susan Flynn, asking her or reminding her that we have that task to do. That's all.
Okay. But I have the people that were on that committee 50 years ago. And
Okay.
they're not around, but also
Need to park. They're already parked.
They're less
Very
active than
fun.
they used to be.
So the thing is, though, part of the newspaper articles, which I'm going to sort of put together in a folder, has the thought process of the town council led on who they were going to appoint to do it.
What year is it, Henry?
2023.
Ooh, quick.
It's coming. It's 2.5 years from now, but it's coming quick. And so hopefully, please God, no more COVID, or COVID is hopefully out of our lives by 2023.
Well, it'll never be out of our lives.
Never
No,
be
I know it
It's
won't.
controlled.
I know it won't. In fact, I read an article, the 1918 flu is still not out of our lives.
Right, right.
Good news is we don't look a day over 295.
Yeah. So I wanted to report that. And also, it's just to get people going with a thought process of what I'll be doing a lot more next week because the EDC is meeting next Thursday. So I will talk more about what I've been able to data mine. And also the one person I've got to recognize, you can't just go into the library anymore. So the research librarian, her name is Jessica Wilson, and she worked with me for like 2 weeks on this over the phone and through email. And she just worked her tail off, getting me information out of the archives and Narragansett Times.
That's so sad that we can't go into the library anymore.
You can go into the Peacedale Library, you can go into the fiction section. You just can't go into the nonfiction. And
Yeah.
switch them around.
Research areas.
Yeah, and then you get 15 minutes, I think.
Oh,
One person in an aisle.
Yeah. Oh, it's sad.
they're sad.
All right, folks. Item G, the 2021 annual notice of meetings. We did get that. We have to vote on that. So Colleen can submit that to the Secretary of State.
I'll move that we approve the meeting schedule for 2021.
Second, please.
I'll second it. I checked all the dates. They're all Thursdays. They're all the third Thursdays.
Yeah. All in favor, please?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Colleen, when you read the tape, we voted on your stuff that you asked for, okay? Item H, other items of interest.
Just want to report that I'm selling my house and the housing market is tight. But fortunately for all of you, I was able to find a short-term rental in South Kingstown by Green Hill.
Okay,
And I'm gonna have to find another one, and I'm gonna do my darndest to, my commitment to this committee, I want to honor. So I'll gonna do my best to keep finding rentals in South Kingstown.
yeah.
So you're not going to buy another house?
At these prices,
Well, we got some $279 houses for you.
Yeah. We know some fixer-uppers, and we're
They
gonna.
do
find
require work.
with a tarp,
With a tarp,
Yeah.
with a tarp.
it'd be great.
So.
I heard what Rob said.
And well, I can tell you, I mean, I bought a house that was built in 1946 by a family that milled the lumber on the lot and constructed the damn thing, and it was falling down. It was just, it had been neglected for many, many years.
Well, I live in a house that was built in 1820 by the people who lived in it. And I can tell you inside the walls are little spruce trees.
Mm.
Spruce trees around a chestnut frame, but it's still here.
Yeah.
I'm still here.
So my HRSA grant went in. I finished it up and turned it in the day before the deadline. I was pretty happy. So it includes South County Hospital, Westerly Hospital, Lawrence Memorial, and Bridgeport. And we'll find out in July, but it'll be a good thing if we get awarded. It'll put a sexual assault nurse examiner in every hospital, every shift, every day.
Fantastic.
Set up regional sexual assault response teams. Who knew that Route 95 was one of the busiest sex trafficking corridors in the United States? I didn't know that. It was a surprise.
We'll put that in the, Rob, you can put that in the advertisement.
So it's in. We'll hear in July.
Easy access to Route 95.
Yeah. Oh, don't. No.
Rosalind, can I ask you a question? This merger of Lifespan and what's the other?
Care New
Fair
England.
knowing.
How does that affect South County Hospital?
Right now, it doesn't at all. And there's, Lauren probably knows much more about this than I do because that's her job market. But SoCo is getting courted heavily by Yale New Haven. I
Yeah,
don't think that's a surprise to anybody.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it. I mean, can they compete, South County, with a merger like that?
No, they can't continue.
At the same time, I mean, Lifespan and Care New England both exist as separate entities now, and South County Hospital serves just a different group.
It's a what?
Just because of the geography of our state. So, I mean, I think in terms of what might happen with Yale New Haven, that'll be interesting to see. And Westerly is affiliated with Yale New Haven.
Yes,
already.
Westerly is owned by Yale New Haven.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the Lifespan Care New England thing is going to be a slow moving process. And the hospital closest to us at the moment, although I should say, I just discovered, so I work at Brown, but I have affiliations with Care New England and Lifespan and the VA. So I'm very involved in the full healthcare system in the Providence area. Butler, where my office is based, I believe they have leased space in South County Commons to start delivering programs down here, which was a surprise to me because I had no idea, and someone mentioned it recently. So it could be that with the merger, if they start creeping down here, it could create problems for South County Hospital. Right now, though, there's not much of, there is that women and infants space over there as well. And we've also got the Brown Dermatology Group that's come down. So, they're like, but not until recently, they really kind of focus more like Newport North. But I think maybe there will be movement down here. I think they see it as an area of growth.
They're in South County Commons.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a big presence there.
Yeah.
Women and Infants does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now Butler's going to be will have some.
Is Butler a psychiatric? What is Butler?
Yes.
Yeah,
Butler's Psychiatric
okay.
Hospital. So I believe they've rented the space where the Sears was.
Oh,
And they're
uh-huh.
going to be delivering programs out of there. That's
Great.
what I was told.
So needed. So needed.
Yeah.
And then Care New England is in South County Commons as well. And Lifespan is in South County Commons as well, delivering there's a women's health center and a couple of primary care centers. I mean, you're starting to see, as providers start setting up practices, they're realizing that there's a market down here that wants that level of care. And I think that's the problem at SoCo. They don't have the research dollars or the infusion of, they only have endowment funds. It's kind of a tough environment for them to survive in.
I can't imagine that hospital not being there.
No, I
Oh,
can't.
it'll be there. It'll be there
Either
forever.
they'll get bought up by Yale New Haven.
Yeah.
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 I mean, in terms of emergency services, inpatient treatment, and kind of like acute procedures, I think that there will be a need. And I mean, Care New England and Lifespan aren't going to build a hospital down here. So
No. And they're not going to take over one unless they buy it straight out. And
no, exactly.
Yale New Haven has more of an appetite for it than perhaps Care New England and Lifespan.
Yeah.
Okay. Item 6, the next meeting date and agenda items. So item 6, we're going to meet in March at our usual time per month. And if there's any agenda items, if you want to communicate them to me, I'll make sure that Rob and Colleen get them. Or if you want to discuss them with me, it's just fine. And with that, I think we can entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I've been seconding everything. I'll keep
Yeah, you're
it.
doing well, Susan. Okay, all in favor?
I,
Aye. All right, have a very nice evening and a very safe until you get your shots in the arms.
yes,
Okay,
yes. And have plenty of
Hey,
Advil for shot number
Huh?
2.
Folks, if you know anybody over 75 who has not been vaccinated, who lives in South Kingstown, let them know. They can call the senior center by noon tomorrow, and they're going to be lined up for a shot on Saturday morning. But if we don't get folks by noon tomorrow, they're not going to get on the list until the 3rd of March.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been telling the people I know, offering to help them, but I got my shot at CVS because I'm not 75 yet.
That Westerly?
I went to Newport.
Yeah.
It was I wanted Roz Shast, the cartoonist, to be there because there were all these old people. I was about the youngest person there. All these old people standing on these circles that CVS had put down on the carpet. And she could have had a thought bubble coming out of each one of us. What were we thinking about as we stood in line waiting for our first Moderna shot? I thought it would be great, but she wasn't there. So anyway, okay.
Good night, folks. Be well.
Good night, everybody.
all right, good night, everyone.
Right.
Jason, I'll call you about the survey.
And send around your study, Jocelyn.
Which one? The grant? Oh,
Awesome.